If you want real-time updates on Trump's policies, America's economy, and the latest political news, subscribe to the Trump Briefing Room and turn on notifications. We bring you straight facts, daily updates, and powerful analysis. No bias, just the truth. Subscribe now and stay informed.
Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club. Our formal program will begin in 1 minute, but before we get started, I wanted to quickly review some housekeeping items. The event is being broadcast live on C-SPAN and the National Press Club website, so now would be an excellent time to silence your cell phones. You'll also find cards on the seats. If you have any questions for our speaker today, please write them on the cards and pass them to staff members collecting them around the room. Please feel free to put your media outlet on there if you'd like, but it's not necessary. I will ask as many questions as time permits, but I can't ask what I can't read. So please print as legibly as you can, and also please ask a question. If you write an essay, I may not be able to extract the question from it, so please just write a question. Thanks again, and we'll get started in a few moments. Exactly. Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Mark Sheff Jr., President-elect of the club and the Financial Services Reporter at CQ Roll Call. This morning we are joined by Senator Elizabeth Warren for a discussion of the future of the Democratic Party. Senator Warren is the ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee, which means she is on my beat. I have covered Senate banking for many years. Whenever Senator Warren walked into a hearing, I would say to myself, this is about to get a lot more interesting. And it always did, with the tough questions she posed to regulators and administration officials of both Republican and Democratic administrations. Now that she is ranking member, those questions come earlier in the hearing. She also serves on the Senate Finance and Armed Services Committees. Over her 13 years in Congress, Senator Warren has established herself as a leading Democratic voice on a wide range of issues, including economic inequality, corporate regulation, and consumer and investor protection. In 2020, Senator Warren ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. Prior to serving as senator, Senator Warren was a law professor specializing in bankruptcy and commercial law. She helped create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is now being targeted by the Trump administration. Recent economic data show both rising unemployment as well as economic growth. But surveys indicate that many Americans remain concerned about their financial security, and particularly what has become known as affordability. Senator Warren has argued that working families are under strain. In this economic context, we're entering an election year. Democrats continue to assess the outcome of the 2024 election and consider their path forward. Today, Senator Warren will add her voice to the debate about the direction of the Democratic Party and its electoral strategy. Senator Warren, welcome to the National Press Club.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, and thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to be with you. This is a dangerous moment for America and for the world. A global contest is escalating between democratic institutions governed by the rule of law and lawless dictators who seek to enrich themselves and their cronies. Here at home, President Trump's tariffs are driving up costs for families. Millions of Americans have lost their health insurance so that Republicans could fund tax breaks for rich people. ICE is sowing chaos and terror in our communities, resulting in the tragic killing of Renee Good in Minnesota. And Donald Trump's view of the First Amendment is that he gets to say whatever he wants, and He gets to use the power of government to silence, extort, bankrupt, or even prosecute anyone who criticizes him. Acting like a wannabe dictator that he is, Trump is trying to push out the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board and complete his corrupt takeover of America's central bank so that it serves his interests along with his billionaire friends. And he has invaded Venezuela to boost the profits of oil companies and has announced that he will run the country. Now, none of this would be happening if Democrats hadn't been wiped out in 2024. And according to some self-described experts, Democrats lost power because we were too progressive. For a lot of powerful people, wealthy people from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Washington, too progressive is code used to undermine any economic agenda that favors working people. Look, they put it more politely, but these movers and shakers want the Democratic Party to respond to the 2024 losses by watering down our economic agenda and sucking up to the rich and powerful, claiming that a less progressive Democratic Party will win more elections. They are wrong. Americans are stretched to the breaking point financially, and they will vote for candidates who name what is wrong and who credibly demonstrate that they will take on a rigged system in order to fix it. Revising our economic agenda to tiptoe around that conclusion might appeal to the wealthy, but it will not help Democrats build a bigger tent. And it definitely will not help Democrats win elections. A Democratic Party that worries more about offending big donors than delivering for working people is a party doomed to fail in 2026, 2028, and beyond. So, let's start with some basic math. By definition, the top 0.1% of the economic ladder doesn't have a lot of votes. So when the question is raised whether Democrats should build our tent by sucking up to the rich, it's sure not about attracting their votes. It's about attracting their money. There are, of course, extremely wealthy people who are also deeply publicly minded. For some, it's about living their values. For others, it's the recognition that massive economic instability is ultimately bad for business. Either way, these very wealthy people advocate for better health care and universal child care. They embrace sensible regulations to stop corporate scammers. They press the government to raise taxes, including on themselves and their businesses. Over and over, they push for an economy that works for everyone. But there is a different and frankly much larger group of extremely wealthy people trying to influence policy. This group might align with Democrats on some social issues. They certainly are not MAGA Republicans. But they're also not interested in changing an economic game that is already rigged in their favor. And in exchange for their financial support, they insist that the Democratic Party turn its economic agenda in a direction that mostly benefits the wealthy and further undermines the economic stability of tens of millions of families all across this country. These people push Democrats to embrace candidates who will slow walk popular economic policies. They lobby for deregulation and special tax breaks that will pad their own bottom lines. They promote making big-time corporate lawyers federal judges. They pressure presidents to appoint tepid leaders at regulatory agencies, people who, once in office, seem positively allergic to enforcing the law when that might make life uncomfortable for big business interests. In their effort to shape the Democratic agenda, the ultra-wealthy wield outsized power. And we all know why. Rich people can fund super PACs to prop up political campaigns for their chosen candidates. They can fund their own lobbying efforts. They can build or simply buy whole media empires in order to bend the news to their liking. And, as we're seeing right now with AI and crypto, they can try to crush anyone who gets in the way of their business interests. Over the past generation, the wealthy have avoided accountability time and again. Regular Americans must play by every rule or face real consequences. You don't need to read every news article about Jeffrey Epstein and his good buddies like Larry Summers and Donald Trump to understand how consistently rich and powerful insiders protect each other, regardless of politics and regardless of how obscene the situation has become. The Epstein scandal is real and enormous, but the slew of white-collar pardons issued in recent months by President Trump reflects the same "the rules only apply to someone else" mentality that pervades Washington. So, how does this affect winning elections? After the 2024 election, pundits sliced and diced demographic groups across race, age, religion, and geography to show how Democrats need to grow our coalition in order to win again. And yes, we need support from rural voters, men, and voters without a college degree. And yes, in 2025, we won back some of these folks, partly because Democratic candidates from every wing of the party ran against Trump's betrayal of working people on affordability issues. But in the long run, to build a strong Democratic Party with a sturdy big tent, it is not enough simply to attack Trump. Democrats need to earn trust, long-term, durable trust across the electorate. Trust that we actually understand what's broken, and trust that we have the courage to fix it, even when that means taking on the wealthy and the well-connected. Democrats weren't always just the default option when the other guys were worse. Once, we were trusted by working people to fight for their interests, and we delivered, even against tough Republican opposition. Social Security, strong unions, the 40-hour work week, overtime, Medicare, Medicaid, home ownership for veterans and first-time home buyers, the Affordable Care Act, over and over and over. We showed that we could fight and we could deliver. I understand the temptation in this moment of national crisis to sand down our edges, to avoid offending anyone, especially the rich and powerful who might finance our candidates. But we can't win unless we rebuild trust. And we can't rebuild trust by excommunicating Biden administration law enforcers who, for the first time in decades, actually fought to hold corporations accountable for driving up prices. We can't rebuild trust by calling up Elon Musk when he tussles with Trump and offering him whatever he wants if he'll come back to our side and kick in a few nickels for our candidates. We can't rebuild trust by staying silent about the abuses of corporate power and tax fairness simply to avoid offending the delicate sensibilities of the already rich and powerful. I understand that because of our broken campaign finance laws, Democrats need to raise a lot of money. And I don't believe in unilateral disarmament against the Republicans. But money is not the only ingredient for a successful election. When Democrats water down their economic platform to appeal to wealthy donors, whether the transaction is explicit or subtle, we squander trust with working people, and the money just isn't worth it. Yes, Democrats need a big tent. But there are two versions of what a big tent means. One vision says that we should shape our agenda and temper our rhetoric to flatter any fabulously rich person looking for a political party that will entrench their own economic interests. The other vision says we must acknowledge the economic failures of the current rigged system, aggressively challenge the status quo, and chart a clear path for big structural change. If we are going to pick up the broken pieces from the 2024 election and build a durable big tent, we must acknowledge a hard truth. The Democratic Party cannot pursue both visions at the same time. Either we politely nibble around the edges of change, or we throw ourselves into the fight. Either we carefully craft our policies to ensure that the rich keep right on getting richer, or we build a party that ferociously and unapologetically serves the needs of working people. Democrats have a choice to make, and the first step in rebuilding trust is to admit that we have to choose. Over the past year, I've often been asked about the abundance agenda and how it fits into the conversation about the future success of our party. When this agenda is about making government more effective, count me in. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was built in the spirit of abundance before abundance was hip. The agency consolidated scattered authorities and streamlined bureaucratic processes. And best of all, it worked. Every year, the agency rooted out the fraudsters and returned more than $1 billion to people who had been cheated. The CFPB should be a poster child for government efficiency. And sure, there are plenty of other places where we can cut red tape. But we should make a clear diagnosis of the problem. Where well-intentioned regulations have simply gone off the rails, we should fix them. But ongoing inefficiencies that we cannot seem to fix often exist because powerful people have captured the regulatory process, and they use those regulations to block improvements that would bite into their own profits. Look around. For years, I fought for a simple, free government tax filing system so nobody has to pay a couple of $100 just to file their taxes. And every step of the way, the giant tax prep companies have thrown up roadblocks to stop it. And when the IRS finally built a free and wildly popular filing option for American taxpayers, the tax prep companies swooped in to kill it the minute that Donald Trump took office. And heck, one of my favorite legislative achievements in the Senate is a bipartisan law I got enacted to cut the price of hearing aids by thousands of dollars by overriding a bunch of state-level regulatory hurdles. But even after we got it signed into law, it faced years of delay and nearly died because hearing aid manufacturers mobilized to protect inefficient regulations that kept consumer prices and corporate profits high. And don't even get me started on the defense industry blocking legislation that would have guaranteed our military the right to repair their own equipment. So yes, we need more government efficiency, a lot more. But many in the abundance movement are doing little to call out corporate culpability and billionaire influence in creating and defending those very inefficiencies. Instead, abundance has become a rallying cry, not just for a few policy nerds worried about zoning, but for wealthy donors and other corporate-aligned Democrats who are putting big-time muscle behind making Democrats more favorable to big businesses. It looks like the corporate tycoons have found one more way to stop the Democratic Party from tackling a rigged system with too much energy. Consider the case of Reid Hoffman. one of the biggest donors in the Democratic Party, according to the New York Times. Now, he's the same billionaire who donated $7 million to supporting Kamala Harris, and then spent much of the campaign publicly pressuring her to fire Lina Khan as FTC chair. Now remember, the central challenge confronting the Harris campaign was affordability, and Chair Khan was doing more in that fight than pretty much anybody else in government. Polling showed that strong majorities supported taking on powerful corporations, and the FTC was leading the charge. Democratic leaders, including labor unions and civil rights groups, and progressives like Bernie and me, and moderates like Jim Clyburn and John Hickenlooper all spoke up for Khan. And there was Reid Hoffman, a man with close ties to two of the biggest corporations under fire from the FTC, Microsoft and Facebook, hectoring Harris to promise that she would fire the FTC chair. Now, to her credit, the vice president didn't promise to fire Lina Khan, but she didn't promise not to fire her either. Now, it wasn't just corporate influence at the FTC. In August, Harris proclaimed that she would address high costs facing families by putting in place tough corporate price gouging laws. Later, according to the New York Times, she, quote, narrowed those proposals after a, quote, corporate allies of the campaign badgered her into doing so. Now keep in mind, that story of retreat ran just weeks before the Democrats lost an election to Donald Trump, who loudly, day after day after day, promised he would lower costs for families on day one. Now, we are in a new election cycle, and according to Axios, Reid Hoffman is sending everyone he knows a copy of Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's book on abundance and backing pro-abundance candidates. And on his podcast, Hoffman has used the framework to argue against regulations that slow down data center construction. That's right. When families are already getting crushed by rising costs, and a data center boom means even higher utility costs, when affordability is front and center in voters' minds, Hoffman wants Democratic candidates to stand with the billionaires for higher costs. Running on small, vague ideas that may also raise costs for families, instead of on full-throated economic populist ideas, is a terrible plan for winning elections. And that might not be the opinion of all of the tech titans with histories of funding organizations that are now tripping over each other to promote abundance. People like Dustin Moskovitz, Mark Andreessen, and Pat Collison. But it is the conclusion of every serious person who's looked at the data on what voters actually think. A recent poll by Jeff Guerin, the pollster for both Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer, showed how much stronger a populist message performs among voters than an abundance one. James Carville and I don't agree on everything, but I'm with him when he says it's clear even to me that the Democratic Party must now run on the most populist economic platform since the Great Depression. And if you still have any doubts, look no further than Mitt Romney, the corporations are people candidate. In a recent New York Times op-ed, even he embraced raising taxes on the rich. If Democrats want to win elections, they need to read the room. Or I should say, they need to read literally any room anywhere in America that is not filled with big donors. So, what does it mean to focus our agenda on an aggressive economic vision? At its core, the goal is simple and easy to measure. It means boosting pay and making life more affordable for working people. building more affordable homes and cracking down on corporate landlords, increasing the size of Social Security checks, providing universal child care, passing price gouging laws with real teeth, guaranteeing the right to repair your own cars, machines, and business equipment, strengthening unions, building universal health care, taxing the wealthy and giant corporations, increasing the minimum wage. Look, I could go on, and in fact I have, with detailed plans and legislative proposals. We are not short on good ideas. And to win, every Democrat should be proposing concrete plans for lowering costs. Zohran Mamdani came from nowhere and took down a political dynasty. How? He ran a campaign tightly focused on the cost of living with easy-to-understand platform. Free buses, freeze the rent, and deliver no-cost childcare. Mikey Sherrill also focused on cost of living with an easy-to-understand platform, including affordable childcare and a bold promise to freeze utility rates on day one. And she won by 14 points. Ideas are great, but voters also need to believe that we will fight and that we have the guts to enact an affordability agenda even over the objections of other Democrats. Many voters are rightly skeptical that we'll really make something happen. After all, we didn't even take the extraordinarily obvious and simple step of increasing the minimum wage the last time we had power. Why not? Well, ask Kirsten Sinema, the former Democratic senator from Arizona, who curtsied on the Senate floor while rejecting a minimum wage increase in 2021 to raise wages for up to 27 million Americans, and then spent the rest of her time in office protecting hedge fund managers from paying taxes and blocking filibuster reform. Sinema faced no consequences from her president or her leaders in Washington. Eventually, it was her own constituents back home who chased her out of the Senate. But today, she is cashing in from the industry she protected. The Wall Street Journal recently marveled at the sheer number of projects Sinema has taken on from crypto, AI, and other wealthy corporate clients. And meanwhile, millions of working Americans who have not seen a minimum wage increase in almost 2 decades are still waiting for Democrats to deliver on one of our most basic promises. Democrats win when we show we are willing to fight. And that means even when we fail, we leave everything on the field. One moment in 2025 when voters actually saw Democrats fighting for them was the government shutdown. We refused to rubber stamp Trump's budget unless he rolled back his health care cuts. And we said so loudly and unapologetically every single day. And yeah, a small group of moderate Democrats ended up blinking, so we didn't get the health care wins we could have. But public polling shows that voters supported us putting up a real fight to actually lower their costs. We win when we run on big changes that it will take to build an economy for everyone. We win when we call out corruption and bad actors. We win when we stand against the avalanche of corporate money trying to bury our democracy. We win when we stop members of Congress from buying and selling individual stocks and cryptocurrencies while they're writing the laws that affect those various assets. Sure, a tepid, nibble around the edges approach earns praise from Jamie Dimon and other Wall Street and big tech CEOs. And if we're being honest, that approach also has been a good way to appeal to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee as they decide which primary candidates they will support. But it doesn't take a political genius to conclude that in a democracy, when the choice is between make the rich richer and help everybody else, winning elections is about choosing everybody else. I believe in markets and a market economy. I've spent my entire career trying to make them work better so that our economy works for everyone. I celebrate success. I don't think billionaires are bad people just because they're billionaires, or that corporations are evil because they pursue profit. And let me say it again. There is a big difference between a billionaire who spends his fortune to advance the interests of working people and a billionaire who uses his money to entrench a rigged economy. Ideas are not better because they come from a rich person offering to open his wallet and advance his own financial interests. And our leaders should stop acting like they are. I'm deeply worried about the survival of our democracy. Democrats need to win elections across this country, and I will do everything I can to help. Just last week, I donated over $400,000 to 23 state parties that will be fighting some of the most competitive Senate, House, and governor seats in November. We must win up and down the ballot in these critical midterm elections, and I will keep doing my part. And every chance I get, I will also stand up and say that Democrats cannot build a durable governing majority that actually makes life better for people and rebuilds trust in the Democratic Party by watering down our economic vision. Democrats must build a big tent based on big ideas that help working people. And now is our time to do exactly that. Thank you all.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we've received some questions in advance, and we've collected some even while the senator was speaking. You'll find question cards on your seat. If you have a question during the program, just fill out a card and pass it to one of our staff members here in the room. Cecily and others, she's waving her hand back there, are circulating. We'll try to get it to as many of them as time allows. For those of you watching on our live stream or C-SPAN, you can send your questions to headliners@press.org, headliners@press.org, and please put Warren in capital letters in the subject line. Well, let's start with your analysis of where the Democratic Party is. What you just gave us sounded certainly like perhaps an examination, medical examination, if not an autopsy. And there actually was an autopsy conducted. Last month, the DNC announced it would not be releasing the autopsy despite Chair Ken Martin's public pledge to do so. How do you this is a question from the audience. How do you expect the DNC to implement the findings of the autopsy and maintain trust with voters without sharing the autopsy with the public?
So look, I'm a big fan of transparency. I like seeing everything out there where everyone can take a look at it. But for me, right now, at this moment in January of 2026, we're putting together the foundations of how Democrats are going to run in the 2026 election. And so the point I want to keep driving toward is our economic agenda, and how important it is that our economic agenda is about working people and not about pulling back on the agenda in order to attract more wealthy donors.
In 2024, President Trump received a lot of support from the working class.
Yeah.
He convinced them that he was the person, rather than Kamala Harris, who would be the answer for their economic concerns. I know you are not a Trump fan, but is there something Democrats can learn from Donald Trump when it comes to communicating to the very people you're trying to communicate with?
You bet. I mean, look, Donald Trump stood up pretty much every single day for a solid year. and promised that on day one, he would lower costs for American families. That was his phrase, used it over and over and over. And when he got elected, and the very first interview he gave, he was asked, why do you think you won? And he said, because I promised on day one to lower costs for American families. So here we are, nearly a year into the Trump administration. And the cost of groceries is up, the cost of housing is up, the cost of utilities is up, the cost of health care is up, and all of those are up because of policies driven by Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress. They have actually pushed up costs for American families. So this is the moment for Democrats to stand up and first call Trump to account for his betrayal of the American people, but secondly, to lay out our own agenda and say, this is it. This is what we will do, what we can do to lower costs for American families. And what's so important about that is our agenda needs to be strong. It needs to be bold. We need to be unapologetic about it. We need not to shade it at the edges because we're worried about talking about raising taxes on billionaires may cause some of our richest donors to fade away.
You've heard this from many witnesses at banking hearings.
Yeah.
Regulations and big government add to costs. They make it more costly to serve their customers and investors. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, that's just plain wrong. And it's not to say that there aren't regulations that have gone off the rails, that there aren't regulations that are a problem, but look at both halves of it. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau delivered, until Russ Vought got a hold of it, over $1 billion a year to people who got cheated. And yeah, that's about regulations that say you don't get to build your profit model around lying to people. You don't get to build your profit model around tricking them about what they signed on to. You don't get to build your profit model around adding a bunch of hidden costs at the end. It says instead, level playing field, people have an opportunity to take out a mortgage or a credit card or a student loan and know there's a cop on the beat. That's regulation that makes markets work better. And the efficient enforcement of that regulation, wow, it works for American families, it works for our economy. The only people it doesn't work for are the CEOs of the giant financial institutions who don't get to scoop up every bit of profit they would like to make, including profits from cheating people. And that's true across the board. The CFPB is the perfect example, but there are multiple examples that we have to take another look. What are you calling an inefficiency? An inefficiency because people don't get to cheat other people? Gee, I kind of think that's an efficiency because it means the market works. It means people are competing straight up on the quality of their goods, on the price of their goods, on their good consumer service. But this is the fight we've got to be willing to wade into. It's a fight about monopolies. It's a fight about who has corporate power. It's a fight about who lobbies in Washington to hang on to those inefficiencies that help drive up costs for families and drive up profits for the corporations that figure out how to exploit them.
Your talk today I was all about economics, essentially. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear much, if anything at all, about social issues. There's a question from the Huffington Post. Should the Democratic Party be willing to compromise on social issues like guns, abortion rights, and immigration?
Look, I want to be where the American people are right now. And what they're telling us across the spectrum is that they are under enormous financial pressure. And the data bear them out. I don't know if anybody's seen this. Home mortgage foreclosures are up 21%. since Donald Trump took office. Survey after survey talks about the majority of Americans saying, I worry every day about money. I worry about making it to the end of the week. I worry about making it to the end of the month. I worry about how I'm going to pay off my debts. I worry about how I'm going to educate my children. I worry if I'm ever going to be able to retire. Mm-hmm. It is our economic message that has to be the tip of the spear for Democrats. It is the thing that American people are telling us they want us to talk about. And this is the history of the Democratic Party. This is who we are. This is our fight from the Great Depression on through the 50s and 60s. This is our fight. And we have to be willing to lay out, here are the things we will fight for, and we will deliver. So for me, that's what I'm trying to do here, is I'm trying to lay the foundation for how Democrats run in 2026. And I think we do that on a solid foundation that is based on our economics. And this is the place where we are most at risk for the billionaires swooping in and saying, dial that down. Move back just a little. Not that one. Not universal child care, because, damn, that could drive up taxes on billionaires. Oh, not that other thing, because it doesn't fit with our business model. Don't talk about putting somebody tough back at the FTC again. Somebody who will go after non-compete clauses and click to cancel. Somebody who actually will be there to make this whole system work better for working families. That's where we are most at risk, and that's why I'm in this fight, and that's why I'm here today.
Well, not only did President Trump try to and successfully talk to these people on these issues in 2024, he's trying to do it again now in the last few weeks. He's very much focused on populism, and we have a couple questions about populism. What are your thoughts on the current administration's latest attempts at populism? For instance, limiting credit card interest. And wait, there was another question about that. What do you think about Trump's idea, which he got from you? I think this was a member of the audience, to cap credit card rates at 10%.
Yeah. So where's he been since then? He said that during the election, right? Said to people, that's going to be one of the things he's going to do. He's going to put a cap on credit card interest rates. And I said, let's go. I'm ready. You know, I have that one written out. We are ready to move that one in Congress on the Democratic side. And where's President Trump been? Missing in action. He's just not there anymore. He has no interest in that anymore. Instead, he is worried about profitability, for the people who are making the big contributions to his ballroom, the people who make the big contributions to his campaign. Donald Trump is doing his best to run America to work even better for a handful of billionaires, a handful of oil executives, a handful of people who've already made it big. And we can't be fooled by the fact that he promised to do otherwise. He has not delivered. And I want to pick up on your point, Mark, because I think you're right. All of a sudden, Trump is starting to wake up to the fact that people across this country are more alarmed about their economic circumstances than they were a year ago when Donald Trump was sworn in. And he realizes that there are going to be a lot of Americans across the country come November 2026 who are saying the buck stops with you, bud. What did you do to lower our costs? And that's why he's scrambling around. But notice, at least so far, he hasn't delivered anything that would take a dollar out of the pockets of a billionaire in America.
Just real quick on the credit cards.
Sure.
Senator Marshall posted on X the other day praising President Trump's vow to cap credit cards at 10%. Do you think the Marshall-Durbin bill is going to gain momentum from this?
Well, the Marshall-Durbin is actually on a slightly different point.
I'm sorry,
I know you know that.
Sorry, that's right. There was Hawley's bill.
Hawley, listen, I'm all in to do it.
Yeah.
But one Republican and all of the Democrats does not get the job done. Just do the math. The only way we're actually going to deliver for working people is to put Democrats back in the majority in the House and the Senate. That's what it's going to take.
And on affordability, what are your thoughts on the various proposals that the president has floated in the last few days about housing affordability?
So let's start with whether or not anybody in this room thinks that Donald Trump is serious about lowering the cost of housing. Keep in mind, we worked hard, and I know you covered this, to get a housing bill that really addresses the core of the problem, and that is supply. We're not going to bring down the cost of housing until we build more housing. Most estimates are that we're about 3 million housing units short of what we need in America. And that's housing for first-time homebuyers, housing for seniors, apartments for renters, housing for people with disabilities, housing in urban areas, housing in suburban areas, housing in rural areas. What do we need more of? Housing, housing, housing. So I worked with Chairman Scott, the head of the Banking Committee, and we put together a housing bill, Road to Housing, that has 40 proposals in it. You want to know the main thing about those proposals? Every one of them is basically screened for, will you get more housing out of it? We get more homes built, more apartments built, more people, more manufactured housing. Every one of them, they come from different places. Can you drive down the cost of building so that we get more housing supply? And that bill passed the United States Senate unanimously. Just everyone pause for a minute to absorb what that means in the United States Senate today. Passed it unanimously. And now the House is just hung up. The Republicans are saying in the House, no, they can't do that. They don't want to do that. And where is Donald Trump? Has he lifted a finger to move that bill forward in the House of Representatives? He sure knows how to get on the phone when he doesn't like what they're doing over the Epstein files. He knows how to get on the phone when he doesn't like what somebody's trying to do over Venezuela. But is he on the phone to say, move that housing bill so that we can start right now today on expanding more housing in America? Nope. Donald Trump has just sat back and thrown out one idea and thrown out another. Then, what's the other thing Donald Trump did last week? The Trump administration just signed off on the biggest merger in the real estate industry in history. The two biggest outfits in real estate just merged with each other. You know what the consequence of that will be? Just like it is with any of these giant mergers. It will drive up costs. It will drive up costs for sellers. It will drive up costs for buyers. And the consequence is it just makes housing more expensive and more out of reach. So look, Donald Trump identifies this piece or that piece he'd like to do. He claims that he would get corporations out of home ownership. Heck, sign me up, because I've been working on that since 2018. I have proposals on that. I am ready to go. But I have to say, he has a real credibility problem here. He's just shooting out one idea after another and doing not one damn thing to actually lower the cost of housing for the American people. And he needs to be called out for it. And that's what we're going to do come November 2026.
Well, as of last night, he's trying to do something at the Federal Reserve. And I want to ask you about the subpoena of Fed officials regarding Chair Powell's testimony on the renovation at the Fed. Chair Powell said out loud what I'm sure all of us believe he was thinking in his mind over the last few months, and that is that the administration is trying to pressure the Fed into interest rate decisions that the administration favors. So I wanted to ask you about that, and a related question from Xinjiang Media from China. Do you recall anything from the Powell hearing last June that sounded like perjury to you?
Let me start there. No. But let's do just a little backup on what's going on right now with the Fed. Decades and decades and decades ago, policymakers made a decision, and this was not Republicans or Democrats, everybody. They said we need a Fed that is largely independent of the political process. And we need that because there's an underlying tension on monetary policy. Every president who's facing an election, or his party is facing an election, which is every president, right? Every 2 years, is going to want to juice the economy. And the way they're going to want to juice the economy is they're going to want to dial down those interest rates and throw a little sugar into the economy. So it's a lot cheaper now to make investments because borrowing money is a lot cheaper, and a lot of loans will get made and it'll boost up the economy short term. Long term, the consequences can be disastrous for the economy if you do too much of that, because it just inflates the economy in ways that are damaging for American families, for employment, for investment overall. So the whole idea behind it was to build an independent Fed and to insulate it. That's why its budget, along with the other banking regulators, why its budget is insulated from Congress, insulated from the president. Donald Trump has made clear since right at the beginning of his presidency that he wants to be the decision maker on where interest rates should be set. And he's made that clear repeatedly. He's made it clear by threatening to fire Jerome Powell. He's made it clear by threatening to fire Lisa Cook, another Federal Reserve governor. He's made it clear by picking a fight over the renovation of the historic Fed building. He's made it clear by issuing a statement that says he's not going to nominate anybody to the Fed as chair who doesn't agree with him all of the time. That's what Donald Trump wants. He's saying, I want to put my hand on the dials on monetary policy. And Jerome Powell and some of the Fed have resisted him and said very calmly that they are going to continue to look at the economic data and that they are going to make decisions based on what the economic data say. And that's just not only not good enough for Donald Trump, it's a challenge to who Donald Trump is. It's a challenge to somebody who thinks he's supposed to run everything. And so Donald Trump just stays after it. And now, this is a question about weaponizing the Department of Justice right out in plain view in order for Donald Trump to try to have a chance to take over the Fed as quickly as possible so that he can make political decisions that he thinks will help him rolling into the 2026 election, even if it has disastrous long-term consequences for our economy and also for our economic structure. And I just want to add one more point to this. What Trump is trying to do is terrible for our economy, but it undermines America all around the world. People rely on the American economic system, and I'm saying this at a writ large, that it's a Fed that's independent, it's making decisions based on data. You may like them, you may not like them. I've often not liked them and disagreed on the data, but that it's making its decisions based on its best understanding of the data. The Fed has been the gold standard for that kind of monetary policy decision making, and Donald Trump is just burning that to the ground. And that's going to be costly for the United States in all of our global markets. It's going to be costly for the United States over a very long arc if Trump gets away with this.
Turning to immigration, we're coming near the end of our Q&A time here, but we do have a couple questions about immigration and some ICE incidents, tragic incidences in the last couple of weeks. Let me just combine two questions. What kind of ICE backlash do you anticipate for midterms when compared to economic angst? And should another government shutdown be on the table right now to force substantive changes at ICE? If not, what can Democrats be doing now to channel voter anger about ICE overreach? That's from The Guardian.
Okay. So let me describe what I hear as a senator. And that is how deeply disturbed people are across this country about an out-of-control ICE. Look, I get it. We need to enforce our immigration laws. I believe that we need a lot of revision to those laws and restructuring of how we do it. But what's happening right now feels like an ice that is just out of control. And so I hear from people who are alarmed for themselves, for their neighbors, from an elementary school principal who talks about what it means that they don't know whether to advise parents to bring the children to school or not, and trying to set up contingency plans if parents who are here legally get scooped up by ICE and can't be there in time to pick up a child at 3 o'clock when school lets out. Families that are torn apart, people who are in school and all of a sudden other students are missing. It's true in Massachusetts. I'm hearing from people all around the country about this. So this is a moment when this horrific shooting in Minnesota has taken a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of concern about what does it mean that people wearing masks are coming out on our streets and scooping people up and that then nobody can find them. And I think it's bringing it forward in a way that a lot of people who may not have focused on this issue are getting more and more engaged in it. I worry about Donald Trump sending even more agents, federal agents, into Minnesota. I worry about the idea of just trying to provoke more violence, because this is the part I know for sure. Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and ICE are not making America safer. And the two things that I think Americans care a whole lot about is that Donald Trump promised that he was going to make Americans safer economically and safer physically. And he not only has failed in both of those, he has actually made life worse. And I think he'll be held to account for that.
All right, and we'll wrap up here. One more question.
Okay.
Two more. This one and then the final question.
You must work in the news business. Huh?
Real quick, a source once told me I was sort of like Columbo. One more thing. Going back to your speech to wrap up here, a question from CNN. You've already made key endorsements in 2026 races, and as you noted, have donated to over 20 state parties. What else should we expect to see from you in 2026 on the trail? And where are you going to be boots on the ground?
So I appreciate the question. I'm going to do anything I can to help. I am all in this fight.
Senator Elizabeth Warren argues the Democratic Party must choose between two incompatible visions, either water down economic populism to appease wealthy donors or commit fully to an aggressive working-class agenda. She frames this as an existential choice that will determine the party's electoral viability. Democrats lost in 2024 not because they were too progressive, but because they failed to credibly demonstrate they would fight a rigged economic system. Courting billionaire donors while softening economic positions undermines voter trust and guarantees future losses. Ultra-wealthy donors demand Democrats moderate on economics in exchange for campaign funding, pressuring candidates to avoid regulations, progressive taxes, and aggressive enforcement that threatens corporate profits. Working-class voters need to believe Democrats will actually fight for them, even against powerful interests. Watering down positions for donor comfort destroys this trust. Americans face severe financial strain, foreclosures up 21%, widespread economic anxiety. The winning message centers on concrete cost reduction: housing, childcare, price gouging laws, higher minimum wage, taxing the wealthy. Billionaire Reid Hoffman pressured Harris to fire FTC chair Lina Khan while Khan fought corporate price gouging. The abundance agenda has been co-opted by corporate interests to block regulations that would lower consumer costs. Trump promised affordability but delivered the opposite through tariffs and policies favoring billionaires. Recent Democratic wins, Sauron Mumani and Mikey Sherrill, succeeded with tight affordability messaging. Polling shows populist economic platforms vastly outperform moderate abundance messaging. Bold, unapologetic economic populism focused on measurable outcomes, raising pay, lowering costs, no compromise with donors who want to preserve the current system. Primary the party's economic agenda on working-class interests. Not just 2026 or 2028 elections, but whether Democrats can build durable majority by earning long-term trust or remain merely the default when Republicans are worse.